Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Plan Commission ARB for May 20th. If you have any electronic gadgets, please silence them at this time. Ryan?
Steve Lichtenfeld.
Here.
Carolyn Gatus.
Here.
Jim McAndrew.
Here.
Helen DeFate.
Here.
Amy Waldman.
Here.
David Gibson.
Here. Okay, we have minutes from our previous meeting on May 6th. Are there any changes or additions? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We'll start out with new business. Item number 1 is 118 South Hanley Road. Is the applicant here? Okay. If you'd hold off, we'll start with the report.
The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit to allow for the operation of a marijuana dispensary on the subject property, which is located on the east side of South Hanley Road between Carondelet Plaza and Bonham Avenue. The property is zoned high-density commercial and is in the Clayton Plaza Overlay District. The site is currently developed with a one-story commercial building previously home to Palm Beach Tan. The proposed hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sunday. The structure measures roughly 3,611 square feet and will include a lobby, sales floor, private employee spaces, and restroom facilities. The site contains 23 space parking lot that may be accessed from South Hanley and from Colorado Avenue. Deliveries will be handled via Colorado Avenue, which functions as the rear alley to buildings along South Hanley and Carondelet Plaza. Refuse will be stored and handled via an existing dumpster on Colorado Avenue. The applicant has stated that marijuana products will be rendered unusable if they are required to be discarded and have provided supporting documentation regarding the process. A security plan has been presented to the Clayton Police Department without concern. Staff are of the opinion that staff do not anticipate adverse impact with regards to noise, odor, traffic, utilities, or emergency services. Staff recommend that the Plan Commission recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen as submitted.
Okay, thank you. Now we're ready for the applicant. Please give us your name and relation to the project and add anything you'd like.
I'm sorry, the proposed owner of the site. They are under contract to purchase the property. My client who is here is on his way and he says he will be here in about 5 minutes. So I'm happy to proceed. And if anyone has questions of him, I suspect he would be here at the end. He's the director of compliance, so it may not even come into the play this evening. We have provided a PowerPoint just set forth things that have been already outlined and presented in the staff report, but just to a little bit more detail. The proposed site at 118 South Hanley is zoned in the high density commercial district. Our use is a permitted conditional use under the City of Clayton zoning code in that district. And in addition to meeting the numerous requirements and the standards set forth by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, the site will also comply with all of the requirements of your city's zoning code. There are no schools, churches, or daycares or other marijuana-related uses within 500 feet of the site. And as a fact, there are no other marijuana facilities in the city of Clayton. This site has actually already been approved for a conditional use permit to operate as a marijuana dispensary less than a year ago. As the staff report indicates, the proposed use complies with all the zoning code criteria and is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The site exceeds the number of parking spaces, which is required for the use that we seek. We've included the preliminary layout of our proposed site, and the building inspector just provided his inspection report today, and after the inspection approved after the inspection. As indicated, our security plan has been presented to the Clayton Police Department and they have expressed their approval. Our procedures for disposing of any marijuana products have been provided as part of the application process. They're very lengthy, so I will not go through them now, but I'm happy to provide copies to anyone should they want. All discarded products will be rendered completely unusable before disposal, and they're based on the guidelines that are rendered from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. So we appreciate the opportunity to appear this evening, and we welcome any questions that you would have. Reese, would you be comfortable speaking that? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, good evening, Reese Williams with Armstrong Teasdale. And like Amy said, our Director of Compliance, Paul Rocker, should be here any moment. He can weigh in further on this, correct me if I'm wrong. But in the typical situation, a customer or a patient would enter into the vestibule area of the dispensary where they would have to present valid identification to an on-staff security officer. And assuming all checks out, that is at that time, the patient or the consumer would be allowed into the limited access area of the dispensary floor itself. State regulations provide that the ratio cannot be more than 3 customers within the building to 1 employee. So there is always a managed number of consumers that are permitted to be within the dispensary itself. The typical transaction is 5 to 7 minutes long, where there's either the ability to place an order and go in and pick up that order that has been already placed online, or they can do their shopping or in person. So that's kind of how the typical flow of traffic would be at the site.
Can the purchasers come in groups?
They're welcome to come in groups, but they have to wait in the vestibule, and would only be allowed in as a group if the amount would satisfy that mandated ratio of 3 to 1 employees or customers to employees.
And then we understand that there's no use of the product on site.
Correct. It's strictly prohibited by DHSS regulation, and on-staff security and employees monitor that along with the on-site camera footage could cover the parking lot or out front in front of the store as well. So that is monitored and would be handled swiftly by staff on site.
So that would include monitoring cars on the parking lot.
That's correct. That would be within the auspices of the security.
Let's go around. Carolyn?
I didn't have any questions about it.
Bridget?
Thanks for your presentation. You know, I'm happy to see that the Clayton Police Department has reviewed everything. I received a few emails. I think there's still, people have mixed feelings on the passage of something other than just medical marijuana in Missouri, but I think it's important for everyone to understand. And if there's people online that are listening, Clayton would be on contravention of state law if we prohibited the use or the, allowance of dispensaries in Clayton. So as long as you have, gotten your state licenses and you've complied with all the regulations and security is what it needs to be, then it's hard for us to disallow the use. And I think it's also important too that you are 500 feet from any church or school, daycare, anything like that, which is also required. So there are very few places in Clayton that we can actually have a dispensary because we're not a very big city and we have lots of churches and schools. So this is one of the few places. So thanks.
Thank you.
Helen?
No questions.
Amy?
Just your on-site security. Can you kind of describe that, what that looks like?
So Paul hopefully will be here and he can speak more to this, but
I think he is.
oh,
There's Paul.
Paul, you're here. Well, then you can come on up and you can answer that question. He's the expert, not me. So
with regards to the security cameras, the rules require that you have to have 2 camera angles anywhere a product is at on the facility, external around the facility as well. And then we have to have a security manager signed up with the state, and they have to communicate directly with the state. And their responsibility is to monitor the cameras at least 4 or 5 times a day, doing deep dives into the cameras, constantly have the cameras up. We have a monitoring station. And so that monitoring station is going to be up, and someone will always be at that station monitoring the cameras.
Okay, so it's just someone kind of watching what's happening. There's not like an armed guard or something.
Correct. Some facilities do, but we do not have the armed security guards.
Nothing further.
Paul, can I just ask I'm sorry, I forgot to ask too. Have you guys, in here, it wasn't really clear what the signage was going to look like, which I know you'll submit to staff, but I'm just curious if you have any idea what that might look like.
The sign's going to look similar to the Good Day Farm logo. It's going to be white and black. And
Okay.
so, but the
It's
exact.
not a very big, I mean, it's, the facade is kind of unusual. So the last dispensary that was approved, but which didn't come, the signage was pretty subtle, which I appreciated, so that we don't have big, some of the signage with dispensaries is subtle and some of it's like flashing. I mean, it's just very kind of obnoxious. So I'm just hoping that whatever is submitted is subtle and tasteful.
It will be
So,
very subtle. It's going to be black and white, just like that. No,
Okay.
no strong lighting, just
Okay.
enough to be visible.
okay,
Yeah, we
Thank you.
definitely don't want to have that vibe. More
yep,
of a
that would be
inviting
great.
vibe is what we're looking for.
Right. Thank you.
David,
I don't have any questions.
Paul, could you give us your name for the record?
Yes, Paul Rockers, Director of Compliance for Good Day Farm.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the audience? Please come on up to the microphone.
They had mentioned that IDs had to get checked when they came in by a security officer, and then she just asked, is there a physical security officer on site? Am I missing something there?
Paul, yeah, we have to record it.
There is a security manager that manages all of the cameras, monitoring of the cameras, but we do not have an armed security guard.
Who checks the ID?
The individuals at the reception desk that are looking at security. So we have a VeriScan system that we scan all Missouri state, or not Missouri, but all government issued photo IDs, as well as patient identification cards, and they have to come up as valid on that VeriScan system.
Sir, before you go back, if you could give us your name.
Brian Sheldon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a hand up. Jeff, do you hear us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you guys could hear me for the Westmoreland, because I don't know, this Zoom platform looks different than what I'm used to for some reason. So it was not the current project.
We'll get back to you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, no other hands. Okay. We do have a staff recommendation to recommend approval of the conditional use permit to the Board of Aldermen. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you for coming tonight and good luck. Okay, we'll move on to item 2, 605 South Central Avenue. And is the applicant here? Okay, we'll start with the report.
Property is zoned R2 and is located on the west side of South Central between the street's terminus at Merrimack Elementary and Davis Drive. Property is developed with a 2-story home and detached garage. The project consists of the addition of a new rear patio roof and the renovation of the existing garage. The architectural review guidelines require that at least 75% of a facade comprise of a primary material. As proposed, the garage renovations do not comply with the requirements for the architectural review guidelines. The applicant is seeking approval to allow the garage primary materials to compromise less than 75% of a facade. The existing garage comprises of brick with siding on the roof gables. The renovation would include increasing the height of the garage to 13 feet and 9 inches, and the additional facade created by raising the height of the roof and the roof gables would be infilled with LP Smart siding painted white. The use of siding is less common on front facades on this block of South Central, but can be found on rear facades of nearby structures and throughout the Davis Place neighborhood. Also, as well as on some roof gables and residential additions. Siding is presently a prominent material on the front and rear facades, but not on the side facades. The addition of siding on the side facades in combination with the increase in height is likely to add some visual impact. However, staff are of the opinion that this is not likely to alter the visual character of the area given the use of siding on nearby structures. The front facade has increased visibility given its orientation to the street. And given the limited brick and prominent siding present on the front facade, staff are of the opinion that the increase in the use of siding will have a minimal visual impact as perceived from the street. Staff recommend approval as submitted.
Okay, thank you. Come on up, identify yourself and add anything you'd like.
Hi, Nick Webermuley, owner of 605 South Central. Yeah, very well summarized there. We're adding a back patio roof and renovating the garage. One thing to add is that the color of the siding, we're matching that to the front columns of the house. You know, having it look good from the street was a big part of what we wanted to do for the project. And there was an existing kind of addition on the back that's siding right now. That part of our plan is to redo that siding and also have it match kind of the garage siding. So even kind of the neighbors looking at the backyard would have a good cohesive look, as well as we get to enjoy that cohesive look as well. So. Can you describe the color? Yeah, it's kind of a cream color, not too dissimilar from the trim behind you there. It's called Roman Column from Sherwin-Williams. It's, yeah, kind of that tannish cream. So the color on the front of the house, which I'm familiar with, will not change. It'll just be updated. The color on the front of the house for the columns won't change. That color will be added to that's what the color of the siding will be painted on the garage in the back. It is a little different to have a garage added onto vertically. What will be used? What will the second floor be used for? It's still just one floor. So the current structure, the garage door height is about 6.5 feet. So part of what we're doing is making that garage door up to 8 feet, which is a more modern size. And then as we were doing that, we just wanted to give it a little more. There's, you know, obviously the cost of going a little bit higher and giving a little more headspace in there isn't that much. So give it a little more space inside. So really it's nothing more than storage potential above. Yeah, storage potential above. And it is that it's right next to our pool. So we'd use it for like kind of a pool house area, do a renovation to have a usable space next to the pool that we, you know, more than just a garage. But yeah, that's the idea. Carolyn?
I didn't have any comments on it. Thank you.
Bridget?
I don't have any trouble with the increased siding on different facades. I think it'll look really nice.
Thank you.
Helen?
No questions.
Kami?
I had no issue either, but it's nice to hear that you are trying to make it a cohesive look. And I think that's really important. So
yeah, thank you for your that. Yeah, we're trying hard to keep the neighborhood nice.
David?
No questions.
Any comments from the audience? No? No hands up. We have a staff recommendation to approve as submitted. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Good luck.
Very much.
Okay, we'll move on to the third item, 8125 Westmoreland. And is the applicant here? Oh, okay. That's right. Thank you. Okay, Ryan?
Property is located on the north side of Westmoreland between North Forsyth and North Brentwood. Property is zoned R2 and is located in the Clayton Gardens Urban Design District. Property is developed with a two-story single-family home, and the applicant is seeking to construct a brick two-car garage. The proposal would meet the height, setback, and material requirements, but would result in the property exceeding the maximum amount of impervious coverage allowed on the lot. The garage would be accessed with a new section of driveway constructed of a permeable paver system. The applicant is requesting approval of alternative compliance for the use of the pervious pavers. Permeable pavers are not specifically addressed in the material guidelines. However, given the limited size and distance from the street, staff are of the opinion that the pavers would result in minimal visual impact. The zoning regulations establish coverage requirements to prevent an overabundance of impervious coverage, manage stormwater, and to ensure the preservation of green space. Pervious pavers are not recognized as pervious due to their variable permeability, largely dependent on maintenance and specifications of the pavers. Under the R2 and Clayton Gardens Urban Design District, the maximum impervious coverage allowed is 55%. As this property is located in an urban and design district, the Plan Commission is not authorized to increase the maximum lot coverage. As proposed, the applicant is requesting approval of alternative compliance to measure the pavers as 0% impervious. Alternative compliance is intended to apply in unusual circumstances that might arise when an alternative approach would result or would provide a result that is equal to or superior to that which would be provided by the approach outlined in the zoning code. The pavers consist of a structural grid that may be infilled with grass or gravel. Per manufacturer specifications, they can infiltrate 298 inches of water per hour, have an open area of 40%, and can support a weight of 173 tons per square foot. If the pavers were to be counted as 100% impervious per the code requirement, the lot coverage would increase to 57%. If the pavers were counted as 60% impervious, as indicated by the 40% open area, then lot coverage would increase to 56.2%. And if measured as 0% per the applicant's request, the lot would increase to 55% impervious. Given that the manufacturer documents identify the pavers as 40% open or 60% impervious, staff are of the opinion that the pavers should be considered as 60% impervious. The site is relatively flat with a slight slope towards the front of the property. The lot size is similar to that of nearby lots and does not appear to contain any unusual geographic features. The previous garage was converted to living space in 2012, and a new detached garage was approved as part of that project, but was never constructed. Presently, the site has no garage. Although uncommon, there is no requirement that homes have a garage. Staff are of the opinion that there are no unusual circumstances regarding the geography or development of the lot. A detached two-car garage project qualifies for administrative architectural review. However, the request for alternative compliance for lot coverage requires PC ARB approval. If the design is modified to comply with the lot coverage requirements, the project could be processed administratively. Staff recommend that the item be continued to a later meeting date to allow the applicant to consider revisions to the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
I don't believe I do. I think what he has said is well said. I guess I'm not familiar with the final statement that he asked or stated about considering other options. I don't know that I was a part of that conversation with my project manager that drew this.
Okay, well, that is part of the staff recommendation to have alternative compliance is one thing, but the way I understood it is that a different method so that we don't go over the 55% impervious coverage is what we're looking for.
Okay.
And with that, that's the staff recommendation to continue this to a later date. And
gotcha.
I'll be honest, I agree with that. I'm very hesitant about giving alternative compliance when I would think there should be other ways of accomplishing this task. The other thing, whether it's our 50% impervious plus a 5% addition, we may be looking at that in the future. But right now, that is the rule we're working under. So I do have a problem, but I think you should hear from everyone else on the Plan Commission. Carolyn?
No, I agree with you. I think things might change down the road, but I think for right now, I agree with the staff recommendation.
Bridget?
Yes, I agree. I just, we continue to see all kinds of water problems in Clayton Gardens. So I would just hesitate to do anything at this point until we understand a little bit more about the pavers. And I think it is totally unclear too as to how these pavers are maintained and whether or not they keep up with the impervious, or the pervious, I should say, allowance of water. So hopefully, just understanding how those work a little bit better. It's just, yeah, I would agree, I guess, that we should continue it.
Helen?
I too would agree. And what I would like to see is a site plan, something that clearly indicates what materials will be from the back wall of the house to the north property line. There's things being taken out, and in very light lettering, it says concrete patio, but is that staying or is that leaving? Or is that where you can pick up, trade off pervious and impervious? So I think that needs to be clearly presented.
Amy?
I'm in agreement with staff. I think we need to have it looked at to be redesigned, because I think even if we approve the pavers, I would never approve it for 100% impervious. It would go with what the manufacturer is saying, it's 60%. So I think that's an important delineation. Even if we approve it, it would not be at 100%. It would still be at 60%. But I'm in agreement with staff.
David?
I also agree with the staff recommendation.
Okay. Any comments from the audience? Jeff?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would just really want to understand before I go back to my client with bad news, where you guys are in the process. I mean, if you're not going to adopt the pervious pavers at 100%, is it possible that if we back to the patio, which they do plan to keep as concrete, because it'd be too hard to put chairs out on the product we're going to use as driveway, and that line that you see there is where the patio will sort of extend to. But I guess my question would be, would you consider it at 60%, and then we just because there's really not many other alternatives short of not having a patio and things like that. I don't know. I would just need some direction, because we looked at a lot of different ways. We're even removing some of their air conditioning condenser pads in order to get to that 55%. It's a very tight lot. So is this something that is up for a vote sometime soon that the city is fleshing out, or just fill me in on it, because it sounds sort of like too many things are up in the air for my client to know whether or not to even resubmit anytime soon.
Well, we would recommend that you do take a look at what the alternatives could be to maintain it at the 55% maximum impervious coverage. We can only review and eventually vote on whatever is submitted under the current rules that we're working under. Yes, anything could change in the future, but we cannot guarantee what changes may come or when they would go into effect.
Okay, and so what you're saying is pervious pavers of any kind are not an option today? Would that be accurate?
Well, no, we would still be able to consider it under alternative compliance
Okay,
as long as we maintain that 55% impervious coverage.
okay,
Or when we see if it can work, we would look at it at that time. However, apparently, as a group, we did not feel comfortable with it going forward tonight.
sure, I understand that. I just, okay, so with this product saying that it has a 40%, back to my original question there, if we come back with a presentation that effectively moves out more concrete and replaces it with this product, you would be more likely to approve that?
We might be more likely to approve it. I
Okay,
think we'd have to see the totality of the project.
sure.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, Jeff, we just can't go over that 55%. And you've provided us with a product that says, you know, the manufacturer says it's only 40% open. So it's difficult for us, you know, we just can't move from that number. So.
Sure, I totally understand
Okay.
that. But my question is, if we came back with something that used it at the 40% calculation, meaning we take more driveway out and replace it, you guys would, because I understand what you're saying too. I just want to make sure if we're going back to our client, he understands either it's not going to be approved or it's a whole lot more likely to be approved if we move to the calculation being the 40% pervious aspects of the lot.
Jeff, I think we can't ask the board to make a decision to give you any sort of direction on that response right now. There's a few questions that staff identified that it seems like the board is upholding. One, you have to provide the calculations. A lot of this research staff had to do to figure out what this product was. So you first have to provide us with more calculations that show how this system would actually function. So it says it's 40% open. What's the actual function of stormwater control? And then also the maintenance requirement. So how is this maintained by a single family property owner? And how long is this product intended to last and provide this infiltration system that it does at the beginning? Those are all the questions, the longevity of it, that need to be addressed before the Plan Commission can make a better decision on it.
Sure. Okay. So you're saying you'll consider it though?
We consider everything that you propose, but it's your job
Okay.
to provide
Is
the
it- yeah,
burden.
and I mean, like, yes or no, like the ag tech product, if you don't want to consider it, we will move to something else. So I don't want to keep spending the client's
We're not
money.
going to design it for you, but alternative compliance is an opportunity for you to propose better solutions. But the burden
Yeah.
of proof is on you to show that it meets
Totally
or does
understand
better
that.
than meeting our code.
Okay, so ag tech is still on the table. All right, well, that's
Well, hold on
that's
one
all I
second.
need then.
Landscape architect has to chime in here.
Please
With-
do.
Yeah, with construction and compaction and clay soils, you would have to also prove that you're not just basically laying this on a solid surface and saying it's pervious, because 9 times out of 10, it'll just run off like it's concrete underneath. Once it goes through the paver, it'll just run off anyway. So there's a cross section that you would have to have the manufacturer give you.
Right.
With a gravel base course, some sand, that kind of thing, just to make sure that it will infiltrate into the ground.
Yeah, sure. Sure, and I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I'm just
being
making sure you come back with
EES
that.
Works and all that. So would you guys have inspections through that process as well, just so you know it's being installed properly? Or do you
We
know?
don't provide stormwater inspection, so that's why it's important that you provide us with how you're installing and maintaining. So that burden would be on the homeowner. And that's
Yeah,
why
I'm
it's a
just
little bit of a
saying, like-
higher level, because the city does not have, we don't have inspectors for stormwater best management practices here right now, which is part of why we can't just accept these alternatives and how they will operate, because we do not have a system for inspecting and maintaining them. moving
Yeah, no,
forward.
that wasn't really what I was asking. I was asking as it's being installed, just like you do with foundations. would
We
you
do
wanna
not
come-
have an inspection system for stormwater best management practices.
Okay, so then we wouldn't really even know if it was installed right. Okay, well, that's good. That's good information. So I guess I'll try to get back on the docket next month. Appreciate your time, guys. Thanks.
Okay, we'll look forward to your return.
All right, thank you.
We need to continue this. Okay. Let's continue this to a meeting in the future.
The motion to continue.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We will then move into our Clayton 2040 comprehensive plan.
Great. So we have our consultants here from PJV. Catherine will give a presentation, just so everybody in the audience knows that this is not up for adoption this evening. So we have a presentation. We'll entertain questions and comments from Plan Commission as well as the public. And I'll turn it over to Catherine. You'll just have to wake the computer back up.
Password. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see here. Right, perfect. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all again. Catherine Homaker of PGAV, urban planner, been leading this process with you all for the last year-ish. So I am here tonight to give a final presentation to you all about the comprehensive plan. So you have heard many things about this over the last year. I'm going to kind of very quickly run through some of the stuff you all have heard before and mostly just get to the meat of the plan itself, but feel free to ask questions throughout. So what is a comprehensive plan? Hopefully you all know this as the Plan Commission, but I know you all haven't done a comprehensive plan process in a long time, not when any of you have sat on this commission. So just wanted to reiterate again that this comes from a Missouri law. Every community like yours is to have a comprehensive plan, a zoning ordinance, and then some kind of planning and zoning commission. The city plan is what provides the basis for that zoning, which is the implementation tool. So a comprehensive plan is required to be adopted by resolution of the Plan Commission. We also recommend that the board, while not necessarily required to do so, ratifies it by resolution just to sort of reiterate support for the document, but it is really the power rests in your hands. All right, so the planning process, you all have seen this graphic a million times, but we did the existing conditions report back in the late summer and fall, which sort of gave a baseline review of what Clayton looks like today. Lots of community engagement throughout the process, but the bulk of it happened sort of in a fall-ish timeframe. Then we moved into the land use planning process where we sort of thought about what parts of the community might be changing in the future, where land use conflicts exist, what people sort of had a lot of thoughts about being different or the same in the future. And then that all wraps up into the final plan document that you all have seen. This was guided by the steering committee, made up of residents and other representatives of sort of relevant Clayton bodies, and then city staff. So we would meet with the city staff every week and steering committee about once a month. Lots of engagement happened through the process. So the steering committee had 10 members. We met 10 times during the process. And then there were 5 regular staff attendees that would come to all of those meetings. There's a planning website, about 2,700 people visited, lots of different surveys. I tried to do this math in front of the board last time. I think it's like 800 or something responses to surveys. We had public open houses. So we had 3 big sort of more general open houses for the public. And then we did those ward meetings. So 1 in every ward with 50 to 80 attendees at each. There's pop-up tabling at 11 events. So we reached about another 400 people that way. There's a coloring contest for kids to participate in the process. Committee and commission conversations with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, Sustainability, Equity, you all, Board of Aldermen. And then we did 25 interviews with stakeholders. So those were folks that either the steering committee provided or city staff provided. They ranged from, residents to developers to business owners throughout the community. So just to give another perspective on
what people would like to see in the future. So again, we did lots of different engagement in lots of different ways in hopes that we could touch people. You know, if you wouldn't come to a pop-up event, maybe we could get you at an open house, or maybe we could get you on the website. So I feel pretty good about the broad level of engagement that we did during the process. So the plan itself, I'm sure you all have reviewed it. It's a lot, I know. It is set up using this sort of framework, objectives and key results. So there's the City of Clayton's mission. There's a vision for how that mission would come to be. There's categories, sort of the housing and neighborhoods, commercial development and the economy, those sort of four categories. And then there's objectives and key results that fall underneath those sort of chapters of the plan. The objectives are those clearly defined sort of big goals for the community. And then the key results are those things to help you get there. So something where you can answer, did we do this or did we not? That's the framework of the plan. I know it's a lot. So we're going to run through some of these as an example. But if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer. Again, this is the city's mission. You already had this. The 2040 vision did come out of the engagement during the plan. So we sort of worked on this based on what we heard from the community, worked with the steering committee on kind of fleshing this out. And then as you'll see in the implementation matrix of the plan, we've tied each of the objectives and key results back to some of these vision statements so that we could sort of make sure that the next steps that we're outlining for you all or for staff or for the board to take is tied back to one of those vision statements that the community wanted to see. So housing and neighborhoods is sort of that first big category, that first big chapter. And what you'll see here are all of the objectives that fall underneath housing and neighborhoods. I guess I'll read these. Clayton contains a diverse housing stock providing attainable and quality housing options for a range of ages, income levels, and life stages. Clayton preserves and enhances the unique identity of each neighborhood with relevant and compatible standards. Our neighborhood development patterns embody sustainable principles and seek to minimize impacts on the natural environment and plan for future resilience. And people choose to live in Clayton because it is safe and provides convenient access to first-rate schools, services, shopping, dining, parks, and community amenities. So these big picture objectives we crafted based on what we heard and best practices around the country, but then also worked with the steering committee and the public to kind of wordsmith these. So these have gone through many drafts before sort of being in their final form here. And then in the plan, how it flows, as you all know, is an objective and then a series of key results that supports that objective. So what I'm going to run through with you today is just a few of them. So you can sort of, I pulled out some that you have either asked about before or something the public really had a lot of feedback on, just to give you kind of an example of a few. But again, if you have questions about others, let me know. So under housing and neighborhoods, one key result was modifying lot size and setback regulations to better align with historic neighborhood patterns where applicable. So we heard a lot from the community that people were concerned that current regulations, so the regulations we have on the books, are inconsistent with what existing neighborhoods feel like. So when people come to you, you have to follow the current regulations. That isn't really reinforcing what they feel like it is on the ground today. And so thinking about how you could align those two things, align lot size and setback regulations with what exists today so that your regulations then enforce that pattern that people really like to see. There's a real desire to retain that neighborhood character, so allowing for appropriate infill, but making sure those regulations make sure that it's consistent with what's there today. So one of the things we're recommending that you all think about is investigating a reduction in minimum lot size in some of those residential districts where that incompatibility exists today. And then thinking about modifying setback regulations to allow for more consistency with that existing context. So where those neighborhoods exist today, making sure those regulations match so that anything new is consistent with what's already there. The next one is develop an affordable housing program that utilizes parking reductions, density bonuses, or financial incentives to encourage mixed income developments. So in the existing conditions report, you may remember that 27% of Clayton's residents are experiencing a housing cost burden. It's a relatively expensive place to live considering neighbors. That is obviously a bigger market consideration that you all can't independently solve. But thinking about 75% of residents said they would trade additional height or density or financial incentives for more affordable units. So there is some openness to, based on folks we talked to thinking about what you possibly could trade to try to encourage something like that. So things you all are going to have to consider in the board are you know, is there certain geographic eligibility? Would you want that in only certain places? Is it a set aside requirement? Do you require these things to last forever or only for certain years? Are there design standards associated with affordable units? What kind of incentives do you think you'd want to offer? And then, you know, you could go as far as mandatory affordable housing policies. So lots more in the plan about this subject, but this is one thing that we heard a lot from the community about. Establishing appropriate infill development standards for building form and materials. A lot of people would like to see different housing types in Clayton. There was a lot of interest in single-family townhomes, duplexes, and triplexes, and small apartment buildings for 4 and 8 units. But there's also some concern around where those infill developments might go, and are they consistent with current neighborhood fabric? And so thinking about, you know, some communities have transition standards to help ensure projects consider adjacent properties. So thinking about if an infill house matches the ones next door or the ones across the street. You could think about compatible scale and material requirements to, again, encourage that consistency. Some of these could be as part of specific guidelines in your urban design districts. And then as part of the comprehensive plan, there are character areas in a future land use map, which I'll get into in a few minutes, but a lot of that provides more information about the context of different parts of Clayton. And so that would be a place to look when you all are thinking about beefing up some of those urban design districts or thinking about other ways to put those standards in place. And then reviewing the tree and landscape regulations to further protect and enhance the existing neighborhood tree canopy, especially during construction activities. I would say the least controversial thing we heard during the whole process is everybody loves trees in Clayton and they want more of them. And so thinking about how your existing tree canopy is seen as a strength and that people want to see more of them, it's not a, you know, there's trade-offs, obviously, when you have more trees and more tree canopy, and what does that mean for building and land use and density? But thinking specifically about how your tree regulations are implemented during construction projects is one sort of next step. And then amending regulations maybe in certain areas to be more stringent. Perhaps if they're coupled with other pieces of regulation, that might be sort of a push and pull with some of these things that may be hard for folks. The next big chapter or sort of theme of the comp plan is commercial development and the economy. So the city maintains a strong economic base by supporting commercial development at a variety of scales. Clayton promotes vibrant and attractive commercial nodes with creative enhancements to existing corridors. The city builds economic resilience by valuing and fostering a diversified revenue base. There is intentional development of areas between residential and commercial uses that ensures thoughtful transitions. Downtown Clayton is an active and inclusive place that provides opportunities to live, work, and play, and Clayton facilitates development opportunities with a clear regulatory process. So again, many of these were combined and separated and wordsmithed and all of that with residents and with staff and the steering committee. So this is another one we heard a lot about during the process: develop an affordable commercial space incentive program for new development that utilizes parking reductions, density bonuses, or financial incentives to encourage attainable rents for small businesses and target uses. So we did a lot of research as part of this process about how rents compare in Clayton to other communities. It is just more expensive to have a retail space in Clayton than it is in other communities. That is just sort of a fact based on the market. It's also, you know, not necessarily a good or bad thing, right? It's as a result of having a strong downtown. But it does add a sort of a dynamic when people are thinking about kinds of businesses they wish they saw in Clayton. So it's just a stronger retail market than adjacent communities. And so if residents really want that kind of retail, you all have to think about what decisions need to be made to try to encourage it here if the market doesn't necessarily have local retailers pick Clayton versus somewhere else. So 86% of residents that we talk to are interested in trading either reduced parking, additional density or height, or financial incentives for affordable commercial space. So that's a pretty high percentage of the people we talk to. There is a pretty wide agreement that people would like to see more local businesses in Clayton. And so because of that research and that feedback, that led us to suggesting that you all think about maybe trading increased FAR for affordable space, thinking about a subsidy or a temporary grant program to facilitate some affordable retail space. So I think it's certainly something there's a lot of discussion of in the plan because it's something we heard a lot from residents. Encourage publicly available open space as part of new commercial developments in downtown, either through updating the setback and building coverage requirements or allowing public use of private green space. This one is really, we heard a lot from folks about downtown needing to feel like a well-rounded neighborhood. While it is the business center for your community and lots of employees come in every day, in recent years, lots of new residential has been added in downtown. And there is a desire to feel a little bit more well-rounded as an area, as a part of your community, kind of the shift from central business district to downtown. So that it feels a little bit more well-rounded. And one of the things that people feel like would help do that is adding more green space. So making downtown feel a little softer, whether that's through landscaping or little pocket parks or some sort of open space that just makes it feel less like really tall towers that are sort of imposing. They don't feel overly pedestrian friendly. So thinking about opportunities to create small scale green spaces where possible in downtown. So that might mean updating lot coverage to encourage some open space as part of new developments. It could also just mean working with private developers to ensure that some of that green space that they're including in their new developments is open for public use as well. So it doesn't have a fence around it, or it does allow for some public use so that you sort of get the best of both worlds in terms of that. Create an incentives policy for developments in key areas of the city that diversify the city's revenue base. So the city's revenue base is heavily reliant on sales and use tax and property tax. And residents feel very strongly that the high levels of service that they receive from the city of Clayton as residents is one of its greatest assets. And so it's important to them to maintain those levels of service. And so there's some openness to considering incentive use in specific situations when it's tied back to that revenue growth for the city so that we could maintain those standards that we're used to as residents. So creating an incentives policy that encourages some of these sales tax generators that are also what people asked for through this process. So entertainment uses, filling some of these vacant storefronts, thinking about those significant sales tax generators that could locate in a place that have minimal impact on surrounding communities. So again, lots more of this in the plan, but the idea of trying to combine sales tax generating uses with uses that people really want to see in the community, and then trying to find places in the community that are sort of the least amount of impact on existing residents. And then prioritizing roadways in downtown, bless you, in downtown for different modes of transportation. So there's a general concern about pedestrian and bike safety all over the city, but especially in downtown where there's lots of different modes all the time. You know, there's a lot of folks walking around, but there's also delivery trucks and people coming and going from work every day. So while people want to continue to encourage the office and business environment downtown, that seems like an important thing for the city. Developers like the street network, they feel like the sort of traditional street grid that you find in downtown Clayton is an asset in terms of future development potential. There is sort of a concern from residents that it's a lot of different modes and sometimes it creates a lack of safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so there's lots of research in the report about prioritizing streets for different users. So coordinating improvements that the city of Clayton is making on certain roadways so that you can sort of think strategically about the users on those roadways. So you all have some prioritized delivery routes, taking that a little bit further to where does it make sense to put different modes of travel so that everybody remains safe, but everybody still gets to move through downtown. So we focused on the automobile piece in this graphic here, but as part of the Livable Communities Plan, there's obviously a big robust map of pedestrian and bicycle circulation throughout the city, which we coordinated with for this piece as well. And then revising the zoning regulations to remove conflicts between base zoning districts and overlay districts. So this is one very relevant to you all here. So the city has 13 zoning districts, 2 TOD overlays, 10 other overlays. It's really confusing. It's a lot going on. Even when Ryan was giving his report about homes on the agenda, he said it's in this district and it's got this overlay. It's just a lot to keep track of, and oftentimes it creates confusion and conflicts. And so a lot of recent developments have utilized a PUD, which creates yet another sort of level of things to track. And so, you know, one next step is really aligning the zoning code with community goals and how development patterns look today. So there are less exceptions needed. There's less overlays that add another level of regulation. It also could potentially reduce the need for PUD use. It's probably still going to be used in large projects, but it may reduce that because some things are just a little bit more streamlined. And then it would encourage easier implementation. So a lot of the conversations we had with developers during this process said there's just a lot of regulations and we don't know where to start, and it's hard to make our way through all of them and which ones are more important and which ones they always give exceptions on, and how do we track all of that? And so thinking about how to make implementation and the conversation they then have with you all a little bit easier. One of our big recommendations is to task Anna and her team with thinking about what zoning regulations look like to try to streamline that a bit. The next one is transportation and connectivity. So development adjacent to Metrolink stations is designed using TOD principles to increase density and capitalize on transit access. Clayton fosters a vibrant public environment that encourages community connections, and Clayton is a multimodal city with networks that provide safe, comfortable, and convenient transportation. So one of the key results is encouraging redevelopment and reuse at the Forsyth Gateway area adjacent to the Metrolink station. A lot of research that went into determining that Clayton residents really don't use very much public transportation, although you are very well resourced when it comes to public transportation, and a strong desire to encourage a mixed-use redevelopment approach near the Forsyth station. So we showed many, many maps to the community and asked many times where you'd like to see redevelopment, and this was one that came up over and over. So it feels like one opportunity in the community where there is land for redevelopment and potential for some of those things people talked about. So thinking about revising the TOD overlay to encourage this type of development, supporting housing development in this area is something people were open to, and then thinking about design standards that might encourage some more transit-oriented development in the area. Another one was coordinating with the Livable Community Master Plan to identify priority areas for widening sidewalks to allow for safe pedestrian access, as well as outdoor dining and additional green space in place of on-street parking. So you all did a little bit of this during the pandemic, taking away parking spots in favor of those sort of temporary parklets for additional dining space. There are places in the community where the sidewalks are very narrow, and so dining space starts to encroach a little bit on sidewalks and makes it hard for people to pass in wheelchairs or strollers. And so when we talked to the community, 80% of the people that we asked were in favor of wider sidewalks and outdoor dining space in favor of on-street parking. So as a trade-off, in some places they would be willing to do that. And so that's part of the Livable Community Master Plan, is locations for where that makes sense. So supporting, as you all think about next steps as a plan commission, supporting land use changes that encourage the creation of this type of space. So parts of the community that have certain types of land uses that might be more suitable for this outdoor dining environment, or for a place where maybe less parking is necessary because we take it away from the street. And then the last one is community character. So Clayton government is a regional leader with mutually beneficial partnerships with adjacent governments and institutions. Clayton is a dynamic center of economic and cultural activity for residents, businesses, and visitors. Our colleges, universities, and schools and institutions play a leading role in the cultural, social, and economic fabric of the Clayton community. And Clayton is on the forefront of planning for a sustainable future. So update the public art master plan to include strategies for aligning public art and private art adjacent to public spaces throughout downtown. You all have a 2017 public art master plan update, but there was also a lot of discussion during this process where people were really interested in more public art, especially in downtown, feeling like, if we're looking for ways to soften the downtown environment and make it feel like a more well-rounded, approachable neighborhood, public art might be one way to do that. And then those publicly accessible spaces as part of private developments. So for you all thinking about strategy or some guidance related to encouraging private developments that allow public art access. So there's lots of private developments in Clayton that have a lot of public art, but they maybe don't have any public art access. And so could you all think about a regulation or a strategy around that as part of a public art master plan? And then guidance related to large scale public art. So murals or temporary art or some of those sort of bigger public art efforts that you don't really have in your community, but people have talked about lately as being a piece of what they might like to see. So thinking about those two pieces as part of an update to the public art master plan. Ensuring Clayton has a strong identity that's reflected in the built environment. So I'm sure you all feel the same way, but residents feel a strong sense of community and attachment to Clayton. So whether it's their neighborhood or the city as a whole, people feel like there's a distinct identity and feel a lot of pride in that. And so thinking about ways that that could be put into the built environment. So whether it's gateway treatments at city access points, so people know they're entering Clayton, expanded branded wayfinding signage in downtown, so people know they're in downtown Clayton and it is a neighborhood. And then adding character elements in individual neighborhoods. So whether it's bike racks that tell you that you're in Des Moines, or, you know, something in Clayton Gardens, something that sort of adds those character elements to individual neighborhoods to reiterate that sort of sense of pride people have in their individual neighborhoods. Okay, that was a lot. We're almost done, I promise. So after all of those objectives and key results in the plan, there is then a future land use map. And so a future land use map, this is a requirement of a comprehensive plan. It is a map that depicts all of the parcels in your community with a future land use associated with them. And so you can see on the map here, the yellow and orange is residential, the purple is mixed use. A lot of this was aligning your future land use map with what actually exists today. So same thing with that regulation piece, trying to align regulations and what it looks like to what it looks like today. So I would say that's the biggest change in the future land use map, is just aligning that to what it looks like in reality today. And then to add on to the future land use map, which is the only requirement as part of a comprehensive plan, we also have these character areas, because a future land use map just talks about land use. It's just those 6 land use designations, and it sort of leaves out a lot of the other components that make parts of Clayton really different from other parts of Clayton. So the context, the density, the height, the architectural character, all of those pieces that make some of these neighborhoods feel really different than some of these other neighborhoods, even if it's single family. So the character areas is sort of that whole last section of the comprehensive plan where we go through each of these and talk about the land use environment, but also the density, how it feels as a pedestrian in the street, sort of those aspects that make these places feel a little bit more unique. And then there's also a density map, which talks about kind of the connections between different areas, where activity happens, where places are gateways to the city, how density relates to each other in some character areas versus others, where redevelopment opportunities exist, all of those sorts of things. And then at the very end, it all wraps up into the implementation matrix. And this is sort of the quick guide to the comprehensive plan. In 10 pages, you can get through all of the objectives and key results, and then how those tie back to the vision statements from those 2040 vision statements that we got from the community. And then a timeline, who's in charge, what partners might be relevant. And, you know, essentially this last 10 pages should be used as both your guide and the Board of Aldermen's guide when they think about decisions. So how do the decisions that you make relate to some of these next steps? And then are any of these next steps assigned to you? They are. So it provides some guidance for future things as well. And then we recommend that this gets reviewed annually to revise actions for the coming year. So if things have been assigned to the Plan Commission or to the board or to the mayor or any other department in the city, you all have a clear expectation for who's accomplishing what in the coming year. And then, you know, a comprehensive plan is a 10, 20-year document. So the development patterns in Clayton may lead you to shift some of these one way or another. And so that's why it's important to look at this annually and make sure that you're still sort of on track and that these objectives and key results are still getting you where you want to go. So I think that's it. All right. Any questions?
Well, before we get to questions,
yes,
I have a few comments.
Okay.
And that is, I was amazed by the 180-page book that we received.
187.
187, okay. Thank you. Plus, I think an index and a few more pieces.
Appendix is many additional pages. Yeah.
And having sat through so many of the meetings, the way you brought together everything, and of course, you've more or less summarized it step by step tonight. I know I and everyone else probably has more detailed questions, but I have to commend you and the planning team for listening to us, because I think everything that was brought up in the various meetings that I heard or listened to, it's in there. And I was a little hesitant to think that we would get to this point even in a year, but apparently we did. My only downside in general is when we get to the matrix. To me, it really blew my mind. I had a lot of trouble really relating many of the points back to the written portion.
Okay.
But what I realize is that's something that we, the staff, the board, the various committees in the city are going to have to work on together. It's not a given document. It really is a guideline. But the detail and the complexity is there. And it does go back to the body of the plan. So I think it's a great outcome. I hope that our citizens will look at it, comment on it, because we are going to be discussing it for quite a while. And I do feel fairly confident that we'll be able to make some very progressive changes going forward. A lot of the things that I see in here are relating to incentives, which of course the Plan Commission cannot solely do that. And sustainability, we talked, affordability came up. Of course, impervious coverage, we've heard that tonight. That's wrapped up in the whole thing. So there are many things that will be drilling down pretty deeply in here. So let me stop there and let's move on and see what other comments and questions we have. I'll come back later. Carolyn?
I have till about 8 though, Steve.
Tonight?
I'm kidding. Tonight, tomorrow morning. I actually will repeat what he said. I think it's a beautiful plan. This is my wheelhouse as well with Wolpert. So to me, looking at this plan, I'm like, man, this is good. So, and it's it's a comprehensive plan. I mean, it really is a comprehensive plan in definition. I agree with the matrix part, and I will send you the comments tomorrow, I promise you. And I had quite a few, but they're more detail oriented. So nothing was like, most of it had to do with the green aspects of the plan. So, but I think it's a beautiful product and I think we should all be proud.
Yeah, you know, I think you've probably heard my thoughts on this a few times already, but it is a very, you know, I think you guys did a great job. It's a very, you know, whether it's like informational about the city, I mean, it's just, there's, you know, aspirational goals. And I mean, as to the matrix, I think it's complex too. And I just hope that Anna and her team are able to understand how to best kind of tackle that. I mean, there are other, obviously, people on staff, whether it's public works, economic development, that will also be involved in that. So that's great. And I think one of the things that I really hope, as long as I'm on the board for, you know, having that touchstone, like every year, have a meeting where we really talk about it and see what we've accomplished, because I think that will be a great way to kind of just keep coming back and revisiting what we're doing, to make sure that we're kind of responding to what our residents want to see. So I think that's great. I think there were so many themes that just kept coming out throughout. I mean, whether it was like, you know, vibrancy, that seemed to be a big thing. You know, like Steve said, incentives for retail, incentives for just more, whether it's just affordable housing, so that, you know, new people that are working at Centene or Enterprise can actually live and work in Clayton, even if they're not the CEO of Enterprise. So I think that's great. I think also too, you know, I know that we've all talked about this, and I think I look forward to seeing the executive summary, because I think this is a lot for our residents to digest. So being able to have like a 10-page document maybe that really highlights, you know, the big kind of, you know, like I said, themes, I think will be great. So I will look forward to hearing that, because it is hard to send it to people and be like, why don't you read this? I mean, I enjoyed reading it because I think it is really interesting, but it took a long time to get through. So yeah. I didn't have a ton of questions because I have looked through this a lot, but one of the things that I kept going back to was, you know, and this kind of came up tonight where you talk about regulatory controls. I mean, it's on page 17, but it's related to, you know, aesthetic preferences, which might increase the cost of housing development and maintenance. So is that kind of suggesting that maybe we don't always love vinyl siding, but if somebody wants to use vinyl siding because it's cheap, is that kind of what you're getting to
That's
in
a
the
perfect example.
Okay.
You know, I'm not suggesting you should change it to vinyl siding everywhere, but that's an example of something that like maybe in certain places you would want to change your material requirements to think about how that balances with affordability.
Okay.
You also might change material requirements depending on how it balances with sustainability, for example, if you're thinking about permeable pavers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea is just to think about the requirements you have in place now in terms of regulations, and then think about how they tie to some of those other themes that we've talked about through the process.
I mean, whether it's like sustainability or, I mean, another thing which I love is I want to be able to preserve our existing housing stock. So like, you know, I love the idea of a big demolition fee. I think Anna's a little concerned about how we implement that, but so that we're preserving like the older homes, which are far more affordable than the $3 and $4 million homes that are going up in their place. So I love that idea as well, because, you know, affordability would probably start with housing stock we already have. So, but thanks overall for all your hard work.
Thanks for your participation.
Yep.
Ellen?
That's hard to follow. No, I think it was incredibly well done. I did read all 187 pages, and what stood out to me was I like the sustainability aspect for the older buildings, both the residential, commercial, because I think today there's too much emphasis on it's old, it's, you know, it's not good. And you lose a lot. And there are many times sustainable buildings. So I didn't focus as much on the high demolition cost, but that might be effective. So excellent job. Thank you.
Amy?
So I read through the entire thing too.
This is like 5 for 5.
Right. It took me almost a week, but I was very impressed. I think when I was sitting through like the previous meetings that we went through, it seemed like a lot of just kind of giving back information that you gathered. And I remember just kind of talking with Bridget, I was like, I want some real ideas of like what to do with these issues. And I think that this really gave us that. I like how you had some of the like real world examples of how other cities are handling this and like what they've done, you know, whether it's with different laws and things or how they've implemented. I think that was really smart. That was really what I was looking for. And I, you know, through each of the areas, you really nailed a lot of great examples. I'm really excited about the zoning and getting a cohesive look. I think when I first started on this board, it was like, oh, it's in this district, but this overlay. And I was like, I don't really know how that all works. And so I think just a lot of people don't. And I think with developers, I think that will be huge. And so it really is exciting to kind of see, you know, as a member of this board, but just as a member of this community, what this can really do for us all. I mean, it's really exciting, and you really did a great job with it.
David?
I've spent a lot of time with the plan. I think it's a great plan, and I'm really mentally focused or shifting my focus, I guess, more towards that implementation at this point. We started some really good conversations with the Board of Aldermen, just taking a high level view at this last week at our annual retreat. And we're excited to sit down and figure out how to prioritize these things and start having those conversations. But there will be a lot of smaller meetings that when you go through this and you start looking at those key strategies, I mean, there is a lot to tackle here once we get that figured out. So, you know, we're going to have a lot of monthly discussions with the Board of Aldermen on these various topics, the Plan Commission as well, trying to organize this and figuring out how to break this off into chunks that are manageable for the discussion. But we've got a major zoning code rewrite in our future, and I'm looking forward to all that. So this has been a lot of work getting through this process, but the bulk of the work is actually coming. So
Don't tell them that.
look forward to it. No, it's exciting. It's all good. It's positive. So thank you.
I had a few other comments. Had I started at the back with the implementation matrix, I think I could have maybe understood a little better by here's what you need to do, and then everything in front of it was the why. But of course, I read it backwards, but that's my problem. But what I did notice in the implementation matrices is many of them really overlap. And, you know, you could see that concepts like sustainability, preservation, affordability, economic development, incentives, they all have to work together. None of them are individual. And I think, David, from what you're saying, you were saying the same thing, where I don't think there's going to be one answer for anything. I think it's going to be a multiplicity of answers to get where we need to go. So I really think we have to hang our hat on the last 10 pages or so. And that's what we're really going to be working on. I did have a couple other questions. I know we talked about the character neighborhoods, and it didn't dawn on me what I was missing. And I don't know if you saw the New York Times this weekend. They produced this Defined by You, which was absolutely fascinating to go through. It's extremely complex, but I began thinking that even our neighborhoods could be broken down even further. Because when I went back in, our individual character neighborhoods, some of them are divided by major streets within them. Some of them have multifamily on one side, single family on another, a whole range of differences. So I think as we go forward, we may want to modify that a little more, that our understanding of our own character is just beginning at this point.
Totally. I think during the process, it was sort of a slippery slope of like, how small do we break up Clayton into, which already is sort of a small community. And so that's how we landed on the ones we did, just because it had to be big enough to still be workable. But I do think that the character areas can be a starting point when you start thinking about the zoning regulations. So what is the context and the character and the feel in some of these character areas? And then how can you use the zoning code, which obviously drills down much further, to figure out how to enforce those regulations and that character in those different pockets of those areas. So I'm with you.
So many of those items are not the purview of only the Plan Commission. And I don't think we can really get into them, but we'll have to be talking with staff, the board, and the other department heads. But I think either you or the commission have covered everything that I sent in, plus many other things. So what I'd like to know is, are there anyone in the audience who have comments? Even you, Stuart? No. Okay. Were there any hands up? None. Okay. Well, let me just run through my notes. Oh yes, there were comments that came from citizens about open space in the downtown area. That I think really comes back to a zoning issue, and you had a very good graphic that we've talked about previously. Instead of covering an entire site with a building, where if you hold it back, there should be a trade-off. The square footage that is lost could be given to greater height. Do you see that as a real natural way to go for a city of our size with our relatively small downtown plots?
Yes, I think we talked about that a lot during the process, that because of the market, you are not going to get a full parcel as a park. You are just not. And I'm not sure that it would be recommended anyway if you're trying to create a really lively street level experience. But pushing a building back slightly, or even if it's a corner, could allow for some street level activation and some of that kind of softened feel, that warmth that people are looking for in downtown. But you know, it's a market. And so that does take space out of the building. And so thinking about what you can trade, that residents are kind of okay with the idea of, to get that extra green space, you know, the height and density was one of the big ones.
Steve, can I just add to that too? You know, so Catherine, I feel like we've talked a lot about that, you know, like in theory, you know, people talk about Herbie's, you know, because it's set back from the corner. So people love, you know, that atmosphere. But then conversely, you have properties like the Pierre Laclede building where, yes, it's set back. So in theory, you'd have this great plaza area, but it's dead space.
Totally.
So like the building is so set back that it doesn't do anything for the vibrancy on the street. So in the future, encouraging developers, you know, so I don't know, mandating a restaurant or mandating any sort of open space that would maybe have a food truck that could drop in. I don't know. So like thinking about how you do that without creating this dead space, which is what we have in front of Pierre Laclede and in front of some other properties like on Carondelet and like that have these plaza areas, but nothing's there. So
yeah, so some communities have thought about, as part of their downtown zoning, a specific corridor where you would want to prioritize that, or certain corners of buildings that you would want to prioritize it. Maybe you don't want to offer that option in all of downtown because it doesn't make sense in certain places that might end up being dead space. You could also think about how it relates to the public art master plan, and are certain places going to be prioritized for larger scale public art that might activate the space. So it speaks to Steve, it's all connected point. But I do think you would want to think really strategically around that not being a regulation that applies sort of blanket.
yeah, because I think when we talked to H3 several years ago, it was kind of like, you should put buildings right up at the street. And I know we get this wall of glass, but then you have storefronts where people can look in the windows and look in the restaurants or look in the stores. And so that encourages more activation and vibrancy, but you know,
right.
So, yeah.
I like the idea of the pocket parks, the infill parks, like just intermittently throughout. I think that's a really clever idea to do art or anything.
Right. And the city doesn't need to maintain those if they're part of a larger development where it becomes private space that's publicly accessible.
Like little surprises as you're walking down the street.
We talked about the character neighborhoods. The downtown one, when we're talking about open green space, we don't seem to have a center, sort of an iconic center. It's covered with buildings right now. Do you have any further comment on that? How we could?
The vast majority of people did not ask for any sort of like central public space, because people feel like Shaw Park is that public space adjacent to downtown. And the ask from residents was more for these smaller scale opportunities that sort of filled in around the entire downtown area to make downtown as a whole feel like a well-rounded neighborhood, as opposed to having downtown feel like a center of office adjacent to a large park. That makes sense?
The reason I bring that up, I've been around long enough to remember, and maybe some other people in the audience do, when the Justice Center was a parking lot. And before that, it was a park right in the middle of downtown. Of course, we gave those up as county government grew. You know, so I'm not saying we need to recreate the past, but there was definitely a use and a meaning to having that. And it made me think, when you go out into rural areas and you come into a county seat of a small county, you will find the courthouse and there's always green space around it. That's right. And it's always ringed with retail, commercial, some activity, which gives it sort of a central node. And I'm not sure we can ever get back to that, or, you know, if it's even possible.
I don't have any papers to look through.
You're fine.
But I read it, I promise. I like the idea of closing that one street. Where? So it's just active.
Well, following up on that, the Buzz Westfall Park is somewhat secluded from everything. It's a great place to walk my dog when I still had a dog. But it just seems to be in the wrong place. It's hidden. Unfortunately, it can't be moved. But maybe there's an opportunity when the county government begins seriously looking at what their facilities are going to do. Maybe there's a joint effort between the county and the city to come up with some meaningful space as well as satisfying their needs. I've one other big thing I'd like to bring up, and that's our PUD process. It's complex. It confuses everyone. It's full of trade-offs. We've used it. We keep modifying it. Is there a way to get rid of it?
Good question. So I don't know if you want to get rid of it necessarily, but I do think by streamlining some of the regulations that you have now, you could make that process a bit more predictable because you will have a more clear zoning code that really outlines what you would like to see, perhaps with less layers of additional regulations on top. And then you all would have a clearer picture because right now your PUD, you can trade a bazillion different things, right? There's lots of different points that people can get as part of a process. And so it is really confusing. Even me looking at these things in other jurisdictions, it is confusing. And so I think the more you can streamline the regulations to make them predictable for people, residents and developers, the less you have to rely on the PUD.
Well, and I think the PUD like is advantageous in the sense that like, you know, then we can kind of get what we want.
Totally.
So being able to provide points for developers saying, hey, you have to provide, you know, a bookstore, an ice cream store, affordable rent to a local person at 50% discount for 15 years, whatever the case may be, because that's what residents want to see, you know. So thinking about, I think the PUD can at least provide ways so we really get a clear idea. This is what we want. So we need to ask for it through the PUD. So, but I agree with you. I mean, it is confusing. And Catherine, I think, you know, that was something we talked about at the retreat at the Board of Aldermen, saying like, that's one of the things I think Anna and her team plans to tackle first. So.
Well, what I think you've developed is something that's really workable. And I think it puts a lot of burden on our staff. I have every confidence that it will be handled to the benefit for the entire city.
Make a vote to hire more people for staff. Do we have a second?
Was there a second? But I really, I appreciate all the effort, not just of the planning team, but of our staff who were really in there all the time. Some of us were somewhat involved at times, but they were in there the whole time. So we thank you for all of that. So, any other comments? As Anna indicated at the beginning, this is going to be an ongoing process. We'll be looking probably piece by piece and how they intersect and in the code revisions and everything else. So I think we've got our work cut out.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Other comments? Amy?
Nothing further.
Ellen?
Nothing further.
Bridget?
Nothing further.
Carolyn?
Comments? No comments.
David?
Not tonight.
Anna?
Yeah, just for the public, so the draft is still available on engageclayton.com. You still can submit comments through that process, or my contact information is also on the website. If you have questions or comments that you want to send directly to me, this plan, the public hearing has been advertised for the first meeting in June for this meeting or this board. So that's also, that meeting date and information is on engageclayton.com. So we'll be back in June to hear this plan to move forward.
Ryan, any updates for us?
Nothing too exciting. I expect the next agenda to be pretty light, only a couple items.
Okay. Obi? Nothing? Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for attending. We're adjourned.